Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining me in the Presence Project. This is the webinar to explain how the project works and gives you some information about the background for it and lays some foundation. I'd like to share a video with you first just to set our mood.
I love your
A reading from Genesis 28, verses 10 to 22. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending upon it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your descendants. And your descendants shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and the east and the north and to the south. And by you and your descendants shall all the families of earth bless themselves. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done that of which I have spoken to you. And then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid. And he said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And so Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone which he had put under his head, and he set it up for a pillar, and he poured oil on the top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel. But the name of the city was Luz at first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I may come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that thou givest me, I will give the tenth to thee. Consider a person who would say, Surely God is in this place, and I did not know it. What have they discovered? What made them come to this realization? Why didn't they know this before? Where is this place? Is it special? Why? Will this insight change their life? Is God where you are? How would you know? These are just a few of the questions that swirl around this remarkable scene from Jacob's life, the night of his awakening. And for us, it's one of the most intriguing and instructive biblical stories for awakening to the presence of God. If you're a person of faith, then this story of Jacob is your story. Jacob is not a paragon of virtue. In fact, he's a pretty rotten guy. And he begins this story utterly alone. He's fleeing to escape his brother Esau's wrath after deceiving him twice, finagling for Esau's birthright in Genesis 25, and stealing Esau's blessing in Genesis 27. Jacob is now in liminal, in-between space, and here this nowhere man will encounter God. The sun is set and it's nighttime, time of danger, vulnerability, mystery. Jacob has come to a certain place that he later names Bethel. To Jacob, it's just a place, but in rabbinic tradition, the Hebrew word for place is also a name for God. Listen to the language, Genesis 28, verse 11. He came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. Place is very important. So he's taken a stone for a pillow. It's really interesting. In the stories of the patriarchs of Israel, when stones are mentioned, it's usually about building an altar. If that connection holds true here, Jacob could be seen to be placing his head on an impromptu altar, making an inadvertent offering of himself to God. And then he goes to sleep and has one of the most famous dreams in history. It was the first dream in the Bible, perhaps foreshadowing his son Joseph's many dreams to come. But why did he dream this dream? What state of mind or state of being was he in? Well, maybe it's only because when Jacob is asleep, that he's unguarded enough to be open to divine encounter. The Bible diminishes, the NRSV Bible diminishes the power of this dream for us by omitting a key Hebrew word, hene, behold. King James Version gives it to you, behold. The dream begins dramatically as we behold and in increasing amazement the revelation of God. Hene, a ramp or a ladder. Hene, the angels. Hene, the Lord. Angels ascend and descend the ramp, indicating there's a constant connection and a presence between the two realms. It's telling us that the spiritual is greatly present in the material. God is present. God then speaks to Jacob, repeating the blessings and promises of land and progeny given previously to Abraham and Isaac. These promises are very personal. God promises God's presence directly and ardently to Jacob, saying, Hene, behold, I am with you. The I is very emphatic in the way it's written in the Hebrew. I hope you have heard God say to you, behold, I am with you. Jacob, more than all his ancestors, the one who was somewhat estranged from God and living a duplicitous life, he needed to awaken to God's presence in a profound way. Walter Brueggemann says, the miracle is the way this sovereign God binds himself to this treacherous fugitive. Whether Jacob deserves it or not, he inherits Abraham's blessings and receives his own. The question is, will he embrace these promises? Well, now we get to my favorite part. For me, this story is about awakening to God's presence, and verse 16 is the moment it happens. Genesis 28:16. Surely God is in this place, and I did not know it. Rabbi Lawrence Kushner said, the beginning of knowing about God is simply paying attention, being fully present where you are, waking up. Here Jacob has a spiritual awakening and encounters God's omnipresence as an experiential reality for the first time. So what was stopping him before? God was here all along, and the reason I didn't know it is because I was too busy paying attention to myself. One question that emerges here is, if God really is every place, why don't we seem to notice? Surely Jacob would have learned about God's presence from his grandfather Abraham and his father Isaac. But as we all know too well, just because someone has been taught this truth and their grandparents and parents know it, it doesn't mean the person has ever truly understood or experienced God's presence for themselves. In fact, prior to his awakening, Jacob was pretty antagonistic to the idea of God. When he fooled his father and stole his brother's blessing, he referred to your God, Genesis 27:20. I wonder if for someone who's felt far from God or antagonistic toward God or never given God a second thought, that they might not even know how to start. But here's the thing. It's not ours to start. It's God who initiates the embrace, and it's ours to receive or reject. God was here all along. And the reason I didn't know it is because I was too busy paying attention to myself. There are two main ways that God is talked about in the Bible, as transcendent and as immanent. The more common one is the transcendent God, who's the maker of heaven and earth, God out there. But there's another understanding too, God right here. The idea of an immanent and personally knowable God is all through Genesis. God strolls through Eden, grieves over creation, delights in pleasing aromas, and lunches with Abraham. This is the aspect of God that Jacob has never encountered before. He could ignore the out there God, but he can no longer ignore the very present God. Because now he has awoken. literally and figuratively, to a profound paradigm shift, and he's come to a new understanding of himself and his relationship with God. Okay, here it is. The critical difference in this verse and in Jacob's life is not that God suddenly became present to Jacob. The difference was Jacob became present to God. Rabbi Kushner says, now Jacob begins to ponder the events of his life in a new way. If God was here and I didn't know, then perhaps God has been other places too. And boom, the light goes on and your world changes. Genesis 28 verses 16 and 17. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? In Hebrew, afraid and awesome are the same word, yareh. Both meanings are meant both times. Yareh is the emotion of fear or being scared, and it's also the powerful sense of awe and reverence and utterly overwhelming mystery. Encountering God's presence is frightening and wonderful at the same time. It's a kind of fear that's indistinguishable from joy. And that's what Jacob is experiencing. Is that how you experience God's presence? So Jacob's fully awake now, and he realizes that God truly is in this place. He's savoring the awesomeness and the scariness of the moment. He's reveling in the awakening. Surely God is in this place. Okay, now more questions. Why there? Why did Jacob awaken to God in that particular place? Was it because of its geography? Would he have had the same dream if he had journeyed 1 more kilometer? And would Bethel then be a kilometer further than where it is now? Well, what makes a place holy ground anyway? Is it that the place itself is imbued with a particular innate holiness? Is it like a church that's accrued a spiritual residue from numerous worshipful experiences that have occurred over time in that place? Maybe it's a sacred space because the people in it are sacred and the place is neutral. Quite simply, a place is holy if God is in it. And since God is every place, then every place must be holy. We encounter God in some places, like church hopefully, in order that we might notice God everywhere. Again, it's not about a particular place. The missing piece is our perception, our awareness, our awakening. There was a fascinating movement that happened in the United States in the 19th century called the Great Awakening. They had camp meetings, passionate preaching, lively new music, big gatherings that people had never experienced before. Just as an aside, apparently it was also very social. I read that young people began meeting people that they'd never have met had they stayed back on the farm, which led to a joke in the day. At camp meetings, more souls were made than saved. So camp meetings or revival meetings were all about reviving people's lapsed or sleeping faith. Now, true, for some it became kind of cultural and they wanted to be revived over and over again. But there's an undeniable outpouring and movement of the Spirit here. These were people who were already churched. Right? They already knew that what they were supposed to be doing. But they weren't doing it. It was an awakening from a nominal faith to a deep and vibrant faith. So was it the preaching? The music? Was it the place where they set up tents up? Was it the collective spirit of all the people who gathered? What caused the Great Awakening? Well, all those things may have been a catalyst and created some favorable openings, but I think the difference was the exact same thing that caused Jacob's Great Awakening. And it's what causes yours and mine. God was here all along, and the reason I didn't know it is because I was too busy paying attention to myself. By showing up, people got out of their own way. And God, who was there all along, was revealed. The missing piece is our perception, our awareness, our awakening. Now, what does one do after one is awakened? Clearly the answer should be to make some sort of response. Well, did Jacob? Well, not right away. Astoundingly, Jacob goes back to sleep after his life-changing encounter with God. I'm not sure what to make of that. He has a dream, he gets promises from God, he has a paradigm-shifting experience, awakens to God's holy presence in him, with him, and all around him, and then he decides to go back to sleep. Maybe he wanted to see if he lay down for a while, the strange feeling might go away. But it didn't. When he arises in the morning, he responds to God's presence with an action and a vow. It was a family thing, apparently. Following encounters with God, Abraham made altars and planted trees. Isaac made altars and dug wells. And Jacob set up pillars and anointed them. First mention of oil or anointing in the Bible, by the way. And Jacob named the place Bethel, which means house of God, literally from the Hebrew Bet El, the house of God. And then Jacob vowed a vow, which is how the Hebrew reads. He will repeatedly stumble and fail at keeping his vow throughout the remainder of his story, to be sure. But in this moment, in the afterglow of his awakening to the personal presence of God, I take him at his word. He even says in 28:21, God is now my God. Jacob's awakening teaches us that no matter who we are or how estranged from God we may feel, or how dark our spirit may be, God is seeking to stand beside us and bless us with God's abiding presence. Our task is to lay our head on the altar and become vulnerable enough to allow God through our defenses. Maybe that's why people come to church. God may come in visions or words or nudges, and we can choose to ignore them and stubbornly stay asleep, or we can choose to awaken to the awesome, fearful, wonderful mystery and have our world rocked. This kind of profound spiritual transformation is a daunting challenge for us logical, rational, traditional mainline church types. But it is the sure path to the heart of God. Surely God is in this place, but we have not done a good job of helping people learn to perceive that. It's time for an awakening. A great awakening. God is present in this place and every place, waiting for us, like Jacob, to awaken and be present to God. Everything else in our faith journey flows from our great awakening. So, wake up. Amen. There's a phrase in Latin, goes Coram Deo, means before God, means in the presence of God. To live your life Coram Deo is to live with God, in the presence of God. I don't know if Brother Lawrence ever used that phrase. He probably did. But the phrase we know from him is practicing the presence of God. And I think it means pretty much the same thing. But what does practicing God's presence mean? What does it mean to live Coram Deo? Well, let's start with just breaking down the phrase. What does practice mean? It means to repeatedly do something, to make it a habit, to work at it, to keep at it until you get better at it. We practice things like music, and sports, and the arts. We're practicing God's presence. So what does presence mean? It means to be in front of. It means existence. To be in proximity. There's a physical way to be present, but you could also be physically present but far off and not very present at all. Or you could be far away and not physically present but actually be present. There's an image of a soldier gazing at their partner's picture in the midst of a battle. And in that moment, as they're gazing, their loved one is more present to them than if they were in the same room and ignoring each other. So what does it mean then to practice God's presence? To work at making a habit of being before God. If you ever do spiritual direction, you'll hear the phrase, where's God in this? It's the classic spirituality question. And the answer is obvious. It's everywhere. God is everywhere. But how can you tell? How do you know? How do you recognize God's presence? Certainly we seek to notice God's presence in our overtly spiritual and religious practices, in worship, in prayer, in the Bible, in spiritual disciplines. But we affirm that God is not confined to these few places. God is present everywhere. God's presence is drawing us to be present. Now, sometimes we have a direct, profound sense of God's presence, a mountaintop moment. But even then, you can't see God's presence. You can only feel it or know it or experience it. But more often, we come to God's presence indirectly. A great metaphor is the wind. Can you see the wind? Well, no, but you can see the effects of the wind. So then, what are the effects of the presence of God? What spiritual residue does God emit? It's holiness. Or even better, the sacred. When you realize or perceive something as sacred, it tunes you into God's presence all around. So what is sacred? It means to be set apart. To be set apart as holy. To be infused with godliness or with God stuff. It's a word that has many synonyms, as you can see from the screen. All these words are aspects of being sacred. The sacred is a window to God's presence. So seeing the sacred in something awakens us to God's presence, to God's omnipresence. But it's not that God is actually the thing. God is not in the tree or the flower that captivates your attention. But God's presence is revealed or made known through the trigger of the thing that you see as sacred. So when you see something sacred, you're seeing that it's infused with God stuff. It's infused with the sacred. And you have an opening then. An opening to experience God's presence, which is already surrounding and enfolding you, but you don't always notice. God's dynamic spiritual presence is constantly waiting for us to notice it and embrace it. The things I'm calling sacred, I guess they're like on-ramps, windows, triggers, whatever language you like, awakeners, pointers, openings, showings, if you like classic spirituality language. They're revelations. Now, not everyone sees the same things as sacred, but that doesn't mean it isn't sacred. It just means it's not a window for them. I'd like to show you a video about someone learning what sacred means.
Havak is holy to us. We hold our rituals and our ceremonies there. It's sacred to us. What's sacred to you, Wesley?
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of things are important. I have a lot of respect for things. But I don't really consider anything sacred.
Look around us. What do you think is sacred to us here?
Maybe the necklace you're wearing? The designs on the walls?
Everything is sacred to us. The buildings, the food, the sky, the dirt beneath your feet. And you? Whether you believe in your spirit or not, we believe in it. You are a sacred person here, Wesley.
I think that's the first time anyone's used that particular word to describe me.
So, if you are sacred, And you must treat yourself with respect. To do otherwise is to desecrate something that is holy.
Is that what you think I've been doing?
Only you can decide that.
I guess I haven't had a lot of respect for myself lately.
And perhaps it's time for your own vision quest to begin.
So what does the sacred look like? How do you know if it's sacred or God you're encountering and not just a nice feeling? I mean, what makes something sacred? What properties or qualities does the sacred possess? Is everything that's nice or pleasant sacred? Well, maybe. Because we say that God's everywhere, and so on one level, everything and everyone is sacred. But I don't think that's good enough as a definition. So we need to work with words, but there are so many words to try to describe such a rich concept. So what is the sacred like? What are the characteristics of the sacred? What does it feel like to be in the presence of God? Well, it feels spiritual. It's holy, it's mystical, it's profound, it's transcendent, blessed. It feels expansive. It has breadth and fullness and spaciousness, depth and weight, timelessness. It's experiential. It feels raw, open, laid bare, really real. It fills your senses. It's knowable. It's not just a concept. It's energized. It's tingly. And the sacred is evocative. It calls forth awe. It calls forth deeper and fuller breathing and pleasure and delight and disequilibrium. It calls forth an enlarged world, an expanded consciousness, and a sense of interconnectedness. So where do I look for the sacred? In what aspects of life can I see these things? Well, people notice the sacred through their relationships primarily. In people's actions and their character and feelings of belonging, friendship, camaraderie, comfort, ease, in laughter, in sharing, in openness. When you're together at table, experiencing support, trust, caring, concern. Our relationships are prime windows to God's loving presence. People notice the sacred through their emotions, through gratitude, thanks, relief, longing, through hunger, thirst, desire, through our pain, our challenges, through our learnings and our insights, through questioning and discussing and ideas and wonder, and especially in communion, connectedness, love, freedom, groundedness, peace, shalom, joy, mystery, when we're weak-kneed, when we're in ecstasy. These are all powerful, powerful triggers for noticing the holy surrounding us. We can become aware of the sacred through our activities, too. Our experiences, the events of our lives, our work, our creativity, our acts of compassion can reveal God to us. Our successes and even our failures can reveal God to us. Probably because our guard goes down when we're feeling defeated. And of course, at last we sense and notice God's sacred presence through the windows of loveliness, through beauty. In the world, in nature, in weather, sunrise and sunset, in flowers, animals, through the beauty of the arts, the visual arts, music, poetry, dance, drama, in originality and excellence, when we experience harmony. And what am I doing when I'm sensing the sacred? Well, I notice the sacred everywhere, in every aspect of ministry, in meetings, in worship, in learning events, in work parties, in kitchen prep times, in social times. The sacred is there, in conversations at coffee time. I notice the sacred while I'm at home, making dinner, doing chores, watching TV, making love, sharing family time. I notice the sacred while I'm at work, at play, doing hobbies, being social. In other words, I notice the sacred in all facets of life, everywhere, all the time. Surely God is in this place. Help me notice. And that's step one. Learning to notice, sensing presence, becoming aware of God's presence through all the sacred things and people that surround you. The next step is savouring presence. I love that word, savouring. It's not a word we usually apply to our spirituality, but I think it should be. I mean, think of the things you savor. You can chug down a cup of coffee or a cup of herbal tea or a glass of wine, or you can savor the experience. You can eat your food or you can savor the tastes. You can look out the window or you can savor creation. You can have some music on or you can savor the sounds. You can sit around with your partner or a great friend, or you can savor their essence, their being, their uniqueness. To savor someone or something is to enjoy it, to bask in it, to glow in it, revel in it, allow it to wash over you, flow through you, fill you up, light you up, and enliven you. I'd like you to close your eyes for a minute. Take a deep breath. And again. Are you savoring these words right now? Are you savoring the feeling of shalom that permeates all sacred space when we gather together and open ourselves to it? Are you savoring your breathing? Savoring your heartbeat? Savoring your aliveness? In this moment, are you fully present? Are you aware of the spirit that surrounds you? Are you present to presence? Savor it. Enjoy it. Bask in it. Glow in it. Revel in it. Allow it to wash over you, flow through you, fill you up, light you up, and enliven you. You can open your eyes. Now imagine what kind of impact savoring God's presence like you just did might have on your life and the life of your congregation if you were all more intentional about it. Imagine what kind of impact it would have on your church community if that level of communion and connectedness was your starting place. We start with sensing, and we hold the moment by savoring. The first and easiest thing to do is that once you've sensed the sacred or had an inkling that God is present and you've noticed, is to simply pause and breathe. It doesn't have to be for long. It only takes a moment to have a deep breath in the midst of the breath and say thanks, or wow, or amen. Breathing and saying thanks when you happen to notice something, it's good, but it's kind of a passive approach when you notice, which is great. It's great mindfulness and great heartfulness. But we also ought to be active about this, to be intentional. So I invite you to create for yourself little sentences or prayers that will tune you in, tune your congregation into being intentional about looking for the sacred. When you walk into a new room, when you get into your car, when you first arrive at a destination, when you take the dog for a walk, when you just sit down to start a new activity, say something like, show me, Lord. Help me notice. Surprise me. May I be present. Or just the affirmation of, surely God is in this place. Every time you enter a room or start something, surely God is in this place. Help me notice. The idea is to declare your intention to notice, and you'll notice more. This was Brother Lawrence's method. It was mindfulness with heartfulness. He was constantly intentional about being mindful of God's presence. And as he did so, he filled his heart with adoration and gratitude, mindfulness and heartfulness. Our ultimate goal is to constantly be present to God's presence, Coram Deo. If we string together moment after moment after moment of mindfulness and heartfulness, we may find ourselves able to more fully understand what Paul meant in 1 Thessalonians 5:17. Pray without ceasing. So, we're all about sensing and savoring God's sacred presence. And then the question becomes, how do we get ourselves and our church to actually practice this? Well, I think we can probably all agree that generally the church thing is not working the way we're doing it. Sure, in some places the body of Christ is thriving, but by and large, in the mainline denominations, it simply isn't working. Or at least it's not sustainable. Now, saying that it's not working is the obvious and easy part. What to do about it is the hard part. And I don't have the magic answer. In fact, that's precisely the point. No one has a magic answer because it doesn't exist. There is no program, no book, no leadership guru, no denominational task group that's capable of fixing this challenge. Not because it's unaddressable, but because these types of things cannot be fixed. They have to be grown. Harvard professor Ron Heifetz wrote a game-changing leadership book about 20 years ago. We've been slow to pick up on its wisdom. The book was called Leadership Without Easy Answers. For me, it's the most important book I've read in a long time, and the most important learning from that comes in the difference between technical problems and what he calls adaptive problems. A technical problem is something that can be easily identified and fixed. Your roof is leaking. You need to raise funds. You initiate a stewardship campaign. Technical problem, technical solution, straight ahead. But what about the bigger questions? I mean, our sense that the church isn't working is not a technical problem. Heifetz would call that an adaptive problem. He means that in order to address the issue, we have to work to change the culture of the group. Adaptive problems require people to grow and adapt their way into solutions, into new ways of being. It's very spiritual language for a Harvard Business School guy. Technical problems can have solutions imposed upon them. Adaptive challenges need an adaptive change process. The people have to change. This is why a program-based approach to solving church challenges cannot succeed. This is why the latest and greatest book won't work. And this is also why people come to a 4 to 6 week church course in spirituality or something, and when it's over, nothing changes. Because it was an add-on rather than a transformation. So instead of 6 weeks to change your church, which would be a technical approach to an adaptive problem, the Presence Project builds on Heifetz's adaptive culture-changing concept and uses an immersion process instead. Our bedrock affirmation through this project is, surely God is in this place. And our prayer for awakening to the wow of every moment is, help me notice. It's very simple. Very simple. So being intentional about tuning in and sensing presence is the essential first step. And once you do, once you've caught a glimpse, once you've noticed, once you've wiped the sleep out of your eyes and know that you're experiencing the really real, the next thing to do is to savor that moment. Be grateful. Be moved. Be present. Take a deep breath. Take the time to really stay with it. Now, perhaps you're thinking that's a lovely idea, but we have jobs to do. Right? We have families to take care of. We have responsibilities that demand our time. So we can't be standing around dreamily noticing clouds and flowers all day. And besides, maybe that sounds kind of boring. Enter my hero, Brother Lawrence. Brother Lawrence was a simple lay Carmelite monk in the 17th century in France, who followed the tradition of Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross. Lawrence spent most of his time working in the abbey's kitchen, washing dishes, or maybe repairing sandals. Very menial work. Now, we know his name because he was so tuned into the presence of God that even while he was in the midst of his mundane chores, he knew he was experiencing the sacred. He was so serene, so grounded, so vibrant, so at peace, so alive, so content. Even as he was up to his armpits in dishwater, that people started asking him how he did it. His answer was so simple, it confounds us. He said, "My only prayer practice is attention. I carry on a habitual, silent, and secret conversation with God that fills me with overflowing joy." In other words, he said, I just practice God's presence. His grand, innovative, groundbreaking technique was that he just did it. He actually did it. He didn't just talk about it or do it once in a while. He made it his constant practice. He became the king of mindfulness. After his death, a fellow monk gathered up his correspondence, wrote down all the conversations they had, and he organized it into what has become one of the greatest books on spirituality ever written, The Practice of the Presence of God. I encourage you to read it. Look, there is no secret. The answer to how to practice God's presence is to practice. You don't have to sequester yourself away in a special building or become a recluse or a monk. You just have to become more and more and more intentional about sensing and savoring God's presence. Surely God is in this place. Help me notice. Help me savor. You don't need to escape from your life to savor God. You enhance your life by savoring God while you're living it. You don't need to stop working to pray. You infuse your work with mindfulness, with prayerfulness. You don't need to set aside your responsibilities. You engage your responsibilities with joy and passion and commitment because you're savoring God's presence as you do them. This is what we're going to try to do. This is the culture change we're talking about. This is the adaptive approach to addressing the malaise of mainline church today. The Presence Project combines Heifetz's concepts with Lawrence's spirituality. Now, I don't think this is the magic answer for solving all the church's problems by any stretch. But I do think it can help to change the culture of our churches to the point where we might be open and tuned in enough to hear what the Spirit might be saying to us. And maybe then we can move. So how do we do this project? The idea is to infuse every aspect of your church's life with awareness and mindfulness of God's presence. It's a methodless method. It's a non-program program. It's not a program to run or a technique to add. It's an adaptive immersion process. But it does take commitment to the process. There are lots of things to consider. The primary tool is a very simple, deceptively simple, but powerful affirmation and prayer. Surely God is in this place. Help me notice. It'll almost become a mantra if you use it extensively enough. If I were to say to you, the Lord be with you, chances are I'd hear the reply, and also with you. Call and response. That's the goal here. To say, surely God is in this place, and to hear the automatic response, help me notice. Now, it's originally designed to start in the first couple weeks after Easter, but there's no need for that to actually be so. Some of the readings coincide with Easter readings, like the Road to Emmaus, but there's no need that they have to be limited to the weeks after Easter. Do it whenever you can. And then go through about 3 months, maybe longer if you wish. So if you start after Easter this year, you'll go to June, maybe into July. Here's what you get. You get a complete 3-part sermon series, plus worship materials to launch the project. Please, you're free to adapt these sermons as you wish. Use them as a starting point, go somewhere else if you want, or preach them as is. That's fine too. Make them into your voice. You don't have to preach every word like I might. The first two really should be on consecutive Sundays, but the third two wait a week or two if you can't string three together in a row. And then later on, there's also a fourth sermon for a couple of months into the process, if you want, entirely optional. The sermons cover much of the same material you've heard me cover today in this webinar. And the fourth sermon is actually the material I used at the beginning, how the webinar began. So use the three sermons. It'll give you a chance to share with your congregation the kind of concepts that you've heard today. I'm giving you a bulletin insert for the first couple of weeks. It'll have those wordles that had all the vocabulary words about how we recognize presence and how we recognize the sacred. I'll give you some files that are for creating posters that you can place around your church. The poster is looks like this on the screen. Surely God is in this place. Help me notice, with a woman kind of in a faded worshipful position. You can make those different sizes, whatever works for you. I like a really big one myself, but not every photocopier can print on the large poster paper. You'll also get some material for email blasts, or if you don't do email blasts, maybe bulletin inserts, kind of one a week. They'll have quotes and explanations and encouragement practices, and it's all based on Brother Lawrence's work. This is one of the ways to continue to lift up the ideas apart from just Sunday mornings, so you can continue the immersion process beyond just worship. So what do? You preach the series to begin, the 2 or 3 part series to launch it. Post the posters around your church. We put them in the kitchen, in our lobby, in our lounge, in our Sunday school rooms, in my study, my office, everywhere you can think to put posters up to create an awareness and a reminder. I'd ask you to put the affirmation on your street sign if you have one. We have one of those where you have to put up the individual letters. Put it out there. Everybody who drives by sees, surely God is in this place. Help me notice. It's a constant reminder. I'd ask you to include the affirmation in your Sunday liturgy for 3 months. We use it as a call to worship opener. Instead of the Lord be with you and also with you, we use surely God is in this place. Help me notice. It starts worship for us every week. The more thoroughly you use the language of presence in your sermons, in your prayers, in your liturgy, the more of an immersion it will be. I'm asking you to begin and end every church gathering, every meeting you have, every time you have a bunch of people in the kitchen, every work party, every event, use this affirmation as a bookend. Surely God is in this place. Help me notice. It's really easy for you to do if you're chairing a meeting or if you're attending a meeting. You just come in, you name your intention to notice right at the start, and you're inviting personal or maybe even corporate reflection out loud at the end, or maybe just silently. So put it at either end. Surely God is in this place. And then at the end, maybe you'd say, surely God was in this place. I noticed with ... Maybe invite people to share where they may have noticed the sacred. Now you might need to write a brief instruction to other chairs of committees or groups to help them incorporate that, or just invite people to keep looking at the posters if you have them everywhere. The start and the close, drawing their attention, being intentional. I found the kitchen posters were probably the best one, probably the single best thing to get people to notice. And then the last thing is to send or insert that weekly email or that weekly bulletin insert. It'll have some more teaching and learning from Brother Lawrence and some prayers and some spiritual practices that hopefully will help you. And that's it. That's all there is. I'm hoping there's no extra work, no extra time commitment. It's just a shift in how you do things, and hopefully with profound transformational results. I know it seems really simple, and that's the point. It's the constant reference to it that matters, that makes the impact. It's the immersion in the concept that has the effect. Now, this is a descriptive process, not a prescriptive one. You don't have to follow this lockstep. Adapt these ideas for your own context. Make it work for you. If you don't like some of the ways I describe things or the language I use, make it your own, by all means. Adapt, add, subtract, do whatever you need to do. But I'd ask you to please continue to use "Surely God is in this place, help me notice" as an anchor. It is right out of Genesis. It's biblical, and it really grounds the project. But otherwise, be creative. Find other ways to reinforce the idea. And if they're really good, share them with me if they work. I'd love to hear them. This is about noticing the sacred in everything and everyone, everywhere. It's about awareness and awakening. It's about sensing and savoring. It's about intentionality and adoration, mindfulness and heartfulness. It's about living every moment being present to God's presence. Coram Deo. For the purposes of my dissertation, I'm asking you to do this process for about 3 months and then to chat with me about how it went. So if you decide after hearing all this and reading some of the stuff to go forward, please let me know that you're doing the project so I can check in with you again in August or September and I can hear how it went for you. Everything you need will be included in the resource package in the files you'll be able to access. And you can access this webinar again whenever you wish. And of course, you can contact me whenever you need. My hope and my prayer is that this will become such a part of your culture that you'll continue to do it far beyond the 3 months and not even have to think about doing so because it'll just be a part of you. My congregation did this exercise last year after Easter, and it's still a vital part of what we do. We don't even think about it. Spend 3 months immersing yourself in your congregation in mindfulness and heartfulness, sensing and savoring God's presence, and watch what happens. Hopefully it'll be transformational for you and for them. Surely God is in this place and every place. Help me know this.